of the note. He sings, he speaks. Good afternoon, Michael Crawford.
Good afternoon, Graham.
How are you?
I'm well. Excited, yes.
No, you look perky and at the peak of your powers.
Let's panic.
Because you're returning to the West End. Mm-hmm. Now, when was Woman in White your last West End?
No, The Wizard of Oz.
Of course.
I did.
Yes, of course you did.
Danielle
Yes. With Daniel, that was only a few years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, so I was thinking it was years, but it wasn't that long ago. And do you get offered things all the time? So it's kind of a rare opportunity to say yes, or is this just something that came along?
Well, I think life has quietened down. Well, until now, life had quietened down a little. After Woman in White, I wasn't too well, so I had to take a year or two off, and I went to New Zealand, of all places, and I just loved it there, and I sort of settled there a little. But my family are back here, and so I then came back. I was offered about 2 years after I'd been poorly. I was offered The Wizard of Oz, and my grandchildren had never seen me do anything. They'd seen recordings, obviously, of certain things, but they'd never seen me live, and I did really want to show them what Popper could do, or used to be able to do. So I accepted the part of the wizard, and it was great fun.
Yes.
With Danielle Hope, who was just superb, this young professional girl who'd won the competition on the BBC. I couldn't speak more highly about her. She was a delight to work with, and a youngster, and so there was lots of fun. The whole company obviously were younger than me.
No, but also it's a magical show, a lovely intro to theatre for your grandchildren.
Yes.
Because of what a magical production.
Yes. I mean, it was fairly, compared with The Phantom, it was fairly easygoing, but with the character that I was playing, but it didn't matter to them. They all their friends came, and so a lot of sort of 16, 17-year-olds coming and their families, so very much a family show.
But now you're back in the West End, and it involves young people, but it is an adult show. It's a musical adaptation of The Go-Between.
Yes.
And I know it's quite complicated how it works, but you play Leo, the boy.
I play Colston. Leo Colston is the character, the main character, and I play, as was in the novel that L.P. Hartley wrote, I play Colston, and I narrate the whole story of the 3 weeks that he spent with this aristocratic family, who are the parents of his best friend at school, and he goes to stay with them for 3 weeks, and in that 3 weeks he meets his best friend's sister and is introduced and is besotted with her, as many of us were at 12 years of age. We'd see someone and we'd become besotted, and he gets involved in a tangled web of a love affair between the sister, who is supposedly engaged to an aristocrat, but is having an affair with the farmer, and he becomes a messenger between the two of them, keeping them close, and he has no idea what he's doing and what is wrong with it. And slowly, when this little innocent mind becomes aware, the whole family discover, and it's sort of tragic at the end. So he is running around, and I'm referring to my diary the whole time and singing about his behaviour and his reactions to it.
So it's a big thing. I mean, you're on stage presumably all the time then.
Oh.
Not to rub it in, but yeah, that sounds exhausting.
No, thanks for reminding me. No, I mean, I'm insane, because it truly. I look back at the last weekend and I thought, this must be the largest part I've ever played. So it's insanity, really, at my age to take this on. But I loved the music when I heard it. It appealed to me greatly. Richard Taylor wrote the music, and David Woods did the adaptation. And it is just loving. We have a young cast. We have 3 young Leos that we use, William, Johnny and Luca. And
they'll appreciate the shout out.
Yeah.
But also, does that make it more exhausting because you've got to rehearse with all 3 of them? You can't, they're not understudies, not understudy rehearsals, they're all going to be playing it.
They're all,
yes. So you've got to be familiar with each other. And
yes, but in a way, it gives you more time to learn it, because there's an awful lot to remember, and they have to absorb it, and so hopefully we're going to be there by the end of May, beginning of June, and we'll be ready for the audiences.
And you were saying you started very young. You were a kind of child performer
I did,
as well.
Well, I was that age. I was 12 when I started with the English opera group, and I auditioned for The Turn of the Screw, Benjamin Britten's The Turn of the Screw, and I got down to the last 5, and in the end David Hemmings, the well-known actor, he got the part because he had a better voice than I did.
Oh, stop it.
Oh, no, without a doubt he did. In fact, they all did. And then, but because I'd been apparently fairly amusing, Mr. Britten said 4 months later they were going to do a production of Let's Make an Opera, The Little Sweep. And I got a call back for that. And David Hemmings and I shared the lead.
Oh, extraordinary.
And him still being better than me did the opening nights, and I did second nights and alternate nights. So I know exactly what these boys are going through, and when I watch them working, the recall, it adds to the sensitivity of it. It's a very, very sensitive story.
Yes,
very moving. It's very hard to hold it together when you're singing some of the stuff as well.
As I was saying to you when you were singing, we're saying that's the wonderful thing about child performers is the one thing they can't fake is being a child. There is just an essential truth to a child performer.
Yes. Well, with this, you see, you can only do this kind of relationship that we've got in this show in a theatre, and it's never been done before. It was done as a movie, and it was done that Joe Losey did way back with Julie Christie and Alan Bates, and they won the Palme d'Or, I believe. It was I think it had a darker look than this has, and there was a wonderful production on BBC television in the last 12 months. But this is the first time you can actually do with the 2 characters running simultaneously through from the older Colston's perspective, and so you can relate to the childhood, and you become more the child as you get into it. That you relive some of the things that he's jumping up and down doing. There's still some sort of life in the old dog, and then he goes back to the sadness.
And are you more comfortable in a musical? You know, given that you began with musicals, or musical, the youth opera, and now still being in musicals, rather than just a straight play where there's no songs or there's no, I don't know.
I really don't know. It's obviously an interesting question, but for instance, Phantom was, Barnum. I mean, it possessed me. I loved the character with this larger than life figure.
But that was perfect for you because it had all the physicality, the singing, the everything.
Yes, but I'm not like that. I mean, it's you become someone else when you have this, but it comes from the music, the lyric, and the story. All these things and wonderful direction. The original Joe Layton direction we took and brought to London, and we ran for 2 years at the Palladium. We ran for a year and a half at Victoria Palace. We ran for 6 months in Manchester. The British public took to. I think it ran for about a year and a bit on Broadway.
Yes.
So we took to it more than the Americans in a way.